held onto the wooden frame of the bench they rested on, steadying themselves as the tram picked up speed, hissing as it gained momentum. Though they rode on large metal rails, the ride inside the tram was not very smooth at all, vibrating them along the length and jostling them into each other as the tram made its turns down the track, slowing only enough to make the turn safely, then picking up speed again. Rose stared out the window across the compartment, and she could see the buildings on the side of the street, and the animals that walked along the pathways next to the road, streaked by in a heady blur. Rose began to feel queasy as the tram slowed again and hooked a right into another curve. She averted her eyes to the slower-moving buildings as far as she could see and swallowed, trying to steady her stomach, which was unused to the speed at which they were traveling. Samuel noticed she was clutching his paw rather tightly and petted her on the knee. "Not used to the speed, are you?" asked Samuel, smiling at Rose. Rose swallowed again. "No, not really," responded Rose, placing one paw before her mouth as the tram lurched hard again to the left, taking another corner, swinging them outwards from their seats as the change in momentum carried them with the travel of the tram. "Dad says that if you're on a fast-moving carriage, you're supposed to look out to the horizon as far as you can and take slow, steady breaths. You should settle your stomach a little, and the breathing will help keep it in a sort of rhythm that you may find helpful," said Samuel. Rose looked at him and swallowed again. They were picking up speed again, and it was causing the butterflies in her stomach to act foolishly. "Right, I was trying to, but the buildings are so tall it's almost impossible to do that. Look at how fast they're moving," said Rose grumpily. A deep laugh filled the compartment. Harvey was laughing, causing his great legs to shake in spasms. Harvey bent between his legs, his face appearing upside down between his knees. "You feeling all right, Miss Mousie?" Harvey asked good-naturedly. "I'm all right," said Rose. "I'm just not used to this much movement, and I'm having trouble keeping my stomach settled is all." Harvey's head disappeared momentarily, and a large paw came down to replace it. Between two large fingers, it held a large graham cookie. "Here, Rosie, take a bite of this, and it'll settle your stomach," said Harvey, holding the cookie out in front of her. Rose wasn't in the mood to eat, but broke off a piece of the cookie with both paws, pulling a fist-sized chunk out towards her lap. Rose bit into the chunk, chewed slowly, and swallowed. She reached out to the bench beneath her with one paw and clung onto it as hard as she could while she ate the cookie. Avery removed his paw from between his legs and bent down again. "There you go, Miss Mousie, that should fill it, and settle it a bit. If you're still having trouble, focus on the straps overhead, the one farthest away, and as high as you can see. They tend to move gently, so if you use them as your point of reference, you'll feel better. At least that's what my wife always says," says Harvey, bending back comfortably into his seat above them. Rose ate her cookie chunk, finally finishing it quickly as the tram jostled through her inner seat. When she was finished, Rose focused on the strap she could see on the other side of the tram. It swung overhead back and forth in a predictable arc, and Rose found comfort as she watched it sway. Her stomach settled as she watched the strap, and Rose felt at ease once again. As her nausea passed, she turned back to Samuel and smiled, still woozy from the motion of the tram's speed, and it made its way down the track. "I'm feeling better," said Rose, and she meant it. Harvey's trick had worked, and she was getting used to the movement of the tram, and the violent shakes and leans as it moved on didn't affect her as poorly as they had before. Rose perked up as she got used to it. "How far away are we from the next stop?" asked Rose. Harvey bent down once again. "Only a few minutes, Miss Rosie," said Harvey, smiling. "Thanks," said Rose, sitting back into her chair and using both arms to keep her body as still as she could. Rose was looking forward to getting off the tram and being able to walk the rest of the way to the post office. An anteater, similar in marking to the first one that had walked the platform, came through the door from the other compartment of the tram. He held out a metal hole punch and walked through their compartment, offering it to the animals that he passed. "Tickets, please have your tickets out. Ambleton, stop coming up. Ambleton, stop coming up. Please have your tickets ready to punch," said the anteater as he came closer to Rose and Samuel. Rose reached into her pocket and pulled out the ticket. She studied it as she waited for her turn. There was a picture of the tram printed on the ticket, and the letters that spelled Middletown printed along its length, with the number corresponding to the machine she bought it from, a bright 14 stamped in red printed below it. She twisted it gently between her fingers, rocking with the tram as it turned right, slowing down considerably. The anteater came up to the two of them and presented his hole punch. Rose and Samuel held out their tickets, and the anteater read them. Then punched a small hole in each ticket. Rose looked at the hole and found, much to her enjoyment, the hole was shaped like the outline of an ant. It looked like it was crawling along the paper if she held it at the right angle. Rose flipped the paper from one side to the other, making the ant march in place as she played with it. Rose glanced over at Samuel and saw that he was doing the same thing and giggled. "It's a pretty neat trick, making it walk in place like that," said Rose. Samuel agreed. "Yes, the die and the punch must be pretty well made to cut So finally, said Samuel, rocking his ticket from side to side as he spoke. Rose and Samuel sat quietly as the tram continued onwards, playing with their tickets, until it began to slow down greatly as they neared the next station. Once the tram stopped, hissing its agreement that it was the right thing to do, the doors opened, and Harvey got up and started heading for the door. "Enjoy your trip, Miss Mousie and young Otter," said Harvey, tipping a large hat to the both of them and heading out the door. "Thanks for the cookie and the help," said Rose, as he went out the door. Harvey tipped his hat once again without turning around and was gone to the crowd of the Ambletown station. Rose sat back in her chair as the new load of animals came into the compartment. A large pair of wolves, one in a green dress and the other in a floral dress, sat down next to them near where Harvey had been sitting, their hanging legs blocking the view of their left, but allowing them a greater view of the tram's compartment than Harvey's leg had offered. Samuel studied the woodwork that spanned the length of the tram. Wooden poles stood between long benches that traveled the length of the compartment, cut off by a sliding wooden door in the middle of the tram that separated the two loading areas and cut down on the noise carried about if the doors hadn't been there closed against it. The windows of the tram were separated by vertical panes of colored glass that spilled bars of colored light at angles over the course of the compartment's length. The trim that held the glass in place had carved curls down their length. He enjoyed fine craftsmanship of all kinds and found the tram to be quite well made. Samuel counted the number of colored glass. There were 6 of them, split evenly by the large double doors that opened only when the tram had stopped in its motion. They slid shut, their hidden weighted action forcing them back into a closed position as a toad and a mouse rushed into the compartment. Samuel didn't think much of them until he saw they both had red bandanas. The female toad, taller than the mouse and judging by her height, older than him too, had the bandana wrapped around her wrist like a bracelet, folded in on itself so no knot could be seen. The mouse had his bandana wrapped around his neck, slung low across his chest, and nodded at his left side. Samuel stiffened in his seat and nudged Rose in the side with his elbow. Rose looked up to Samuel and he motioned to the two that had just gotten on the tram. She sat rigid when she realized what the bandanas meant and who they were. Heather and one of the other mice under Valderon's hold had entered into the tram. Samuel and Rose sat as still as they could as the tram began moving, gaining speed again as it headed out from the station, watching the two. Heather, the younger mouse, stepped lightly between the animals that stood with their arms raised above them in the center of the tram. Their arms were always moving as they went, and Rose could swear she saw Heather's arm dipping into the bag of a badgers holding their shopping next to them. The badger made no notice of the interaction, and Heather stuffed the black wallet into the pouch at her side in one deft motion. The younger, smaller mouse did the same as he moved about the compartment. Samuel and Rose held the breath as the two animals made their way by them and headed through the compartment. The young mouse stopped at the rabbits that had gotten on with Rose and Samuel. The father had fallen asleep as well, his book resting against his chest, rising and falling rhythmically as he breathed, and reached into the stroller the father still held with one paw. He pulled out a pouch of sweets that one of the children must have been eating before they had fallen asleep. A collection of animals were printed over the bag. "Animal cookies," Samuel thought to himself, as the young mouse pilfered the snacks and placed the pouch into his pocket at his side. As he made his way by the stroller, he pulled out a fistful of cookies and shoved them into his mouth, chewing loudly as he went. The bunny behind him stirred gently as he walked by, snuggling back into his blanket, and remained asleep. "Unbelievable," said Rose under her breath. Samuel shared her sentiment. The two of them watched as the pair made their way to the door at the end of the compartment and, opening it, made their way through to the next area, the door sliding back into place behind them. Rose and Samuel looked at each other as the door clicked back into place. "Did you see that? A child's food! He took a baby's snack bag," said Rose incredulously. "I know. It's almost unthinkable that someone would do that to another," said Samuel. "I wonder which mouse the boy was," said Rose. "No idea, but that girl had to be Heather. She matched Averly's description to the letter," said Samuel. Rose nodded. "Must be. Who else wears red bandanas and steals whatever they can get their mitts around?" said Rose. "What should we do?" asked Samuel. "There's not much to be done, really. We have no idea that we know who they are, and as long as we don't lead Averly to them, then we should be all in the clear. Hopefully they'll get off at the next station and we won't see them again," said Rose. "Yes, you're right," said Samuel. They sat in silence, no longer enjoying their tickets or the tram ride. Rose could feel herself starting to worry about what would happen if the pair happened to find Averly, and did her best to force the thoughts from her mind. "It won't do you any good to think about such things," thought Rose. Samuel stared at Rose, a perplexed look upon his brow. "We're going to have to tell her about seeing them. It's better that she knows where they are so we can plan accordingly to get Averly around them," said Samuel. Rose grimaced and agreed. "Yes, definitely. It's much better to be worried about them than to pretend they don't exist," said Rose. They sat in silence for the remainder of the trip to the next station, filled with an aching dread that set the pits to their stomach. Rose thought being nauseous was bad, but had to contend that this was indeed much worse. The tram began slowing again as it pulled into the next station. Rose took that moment to jump up from her seat and head to the door in the center of the tram. She slid it over and went into the next compartment. As the door slid closed behind her, Rose scanned the nearly identical compartment for the troublesome animals. Rose could see them waiting near the doors that would open to the station. Heather had one arm wrapped around the pole nearest her and the other arm firmly holding the hand of the younger mouse, who was still reaching into his pocket, pulling out handfuls of cookie and smacking his lips around them. He must be quite hungry, thought Rose, and for a moment she felt badly for the two animals. Heather wasn't paying attention to anything in particular, but was instead steadying herself and her cohort as the tram slowed into the station and came to a hissing stop. When the doors opened, she and the young mouse were some of the first to get off, and they slipped into the crowd and disappeared from sight. Rose let out a large breath of air, sighing deeply. She already felt better knowing that the two of them were no longer on the tram with them. Animals began flooding into the compartment as Rose turned around and went through the sliding door before her. Rose went back to where Samuel was sitting and sat down next to him. "You'll be happy to know that they've gotten off at this stop," said Rose quietly. "Great. Thanks for thinking to do that. Now we have an idea where they are in the town to let Averley know which area to try and avoid. And that was pretty brave of you to go and check on them," said Samuel, impressed. "Not really. They had no idea who I was, and they were more interested in getting off the tram and eating their stolen snacks than anything else," said Rose warily, though she smiled up at Samuel. They sat together as the compartment filled with new animals. The tram hissed as the doors slid shut, and the tram began speeding up again on the final leg of their trip before their stop. Rose reached over to Samuel and placed her paw inside his open palm. Samuel squeezed it gently. The both of them sat like that for a while, swaying and jostling together as one. Samuel was getting tired. The steady motions from the tram were making him sleepy, and he blinked heavily, lowered his head to rest against the wall on the bench he was sitting on, and started to doze. He awoke to Rose shaking his paw with her own. "Samuel, wake up. We're almost there. Come on, Samuel," said Rose. Samuel rubbed his eyes and sat up straight. He had no idea how long he'd been out, but thought that it couldn't have been for a few minutes at most. The stops weren't that far from one another. "How long have I been asleep?" Samuel asked. "Oh, I only noticed about 20 minutes ago," said Rose. "You started humming in your sleep, and I thought it best to leave you alone. I spent the time thinking of what to do if we see Heather again and wondering how Barklin and Averley were doing." The tram slowed into another corner, tilting it to the left, and began accelerating again as it came out of the turn. The anteater that had passed by them before came through the sliding door separating the compartment. "Middletown is next. Be there shortly. Please have your tickets out if you're heading to Middletown," said the anteater. This time they did not hold out their tickets. "We'd better get up and wait by the door so we don't get stuck by the incoming passengers," Samuel. "All right," said Rose, standing up from her seat. Rose and Samuel made their way over to the doors on the other side of the compartment and stood next to the family of rabbits that had remained sleeping for the length of their journey. Rose bent down to the female rabbit and gently shook her awake. "Sorry to wake you, but I wanted to let you know that we're about to arrive in Middletown. I don't know which stop is yours, but I didn't want to leave you all sleeping in case you missed your stop," said Rose. The rabbit blinked and stretched her arms over her head and cracked her neck. "Oh, thanks for waking me. We're on the next stop after Middletown, and I'm sure if you hadn't have woken me, we would have missed it and ended up on the other side of the city," said the rabbit, bending forward to check that the younglings in her pram were still sleeping contentedly. "Not a problem," said Rose, smiling at the rabbit, who was busy testing the bunny's diapers for immediate issues. "Charles, wake up," said the rabbit to her husband. "It looks like Anthony needs a change. We're one stop away, so he'll have to wait until we can get to the station." Charles woke with a start, his book falling to his feet. He turned his attention to his wife and child. Rose left them alone, happy she had woken them before they had missed their stop. Samuel smiled at Rose, and she turned back to face the doors of the tram. The tram slowed for one final turn, swaying the animals to the right, and then continued to slow down as it pulled into the station. It gave one final disapproving hiss and stopped before the exact center of the platform. The doors opened, and Rose and Samuel stepped out onto the crowded floor and looked around, searching for the exits. The station was a near copy of the one they had arrived from, and the stairwells mirrored those they had come up. There was even an anteater with the same conductor's hat and blue and white striped shirt walking down the platform and up the stairs. Samuel grabbed Rose's paw and pulled her into the crowd, tunneling through, and popped out near the exit of the station. "It's so busy," said Rose. "Yes, I'll be glad to get down to the street and head to the post office," said Samuel, releasing her paw. They made their way down the stairs to the landing of the station. "There's the clock tower," said Rose, pointing to the large clock face towering over the square they came out upon. They pulled out their city map and orientated it around the clock tower and train station. That means we only have to walk up a few streets and then the post office should be right there, said Rose, pointing at the square encapsulating a red postage envelope. Samuel put the map away, folding it and placing it in his shirt pocket. Rose and Samuel began walking across the large bricked pavilion, enjoying the unobstructed view of the clock tower and the buildings that took up one side of the concourse. Groups of animals walked between the tower and the tram station. Most of them were tourists being led around by cheerful and informative guides. The Middletown Clock Tower is one of Tanzeria's oldest constructs. Originally, the clock faces could be seen from any part of the city, and most businesses would use the timing of the clock to determine their business hours and when to close for lunch, croaked the large toad that was leading a group of otters and badgers, all adorned with the same orange and blue school uniforms. The group walked in two equal lines, the rear of which was being upheld by a stout rabbit who had to be their teacher. The group passed by the Rose and Samuel, making their way towards the tower. Rose and Samuel let them pass and waited a few moments before heading in the direction of the nearest street, strafing the tower on their right side as they went. They made their way out of the pavilion and turned left, heading down the same brickwork path that the pavilion had been made with, and began passing smaller, more rustic-looking buildings. The pavilion broke from its open design and then down to a street adorned on each side with wooden shops and restaurants of all types. Cafes and fine eateries laid out on both sides, filled with families and couples locked in conversation with each other. Children played in the street, running between the carriages and foot traffic on the pathways, and between the legs of larger and often unsuspecting animals that made their way in similar or opposing directions. Rose and Samuel passed by an otter wearing an old cap, selling papers on the side of the road. Okay, well, I'm taking a break, so I might as well do some ads. This is my first one, so bear with me. So, if you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. That's pretty cool. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And all you have to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Please visit anchor.fm/divergentmind to leave a message so that I may get back to you. Thank you. Have a nice day. So Anchor is asking me to ask you to support me financially. I would ask that you go to my Patreon to do that, which is patreon.com/divergentmind. It means you can either become a monthly subscriber at a different tier of $1 to $3 to $5. I'm not looking for a lot. I'm not asking for a lot. I'm not asking for anything. This is going to go to the end of my podcast. I don't like it when podcasts straight up ask you for money. When I'm doing okay, well, I'm not doing okay. I'm surviving now to the point that I can make this. I would love to be able to make improvements to this by, say, getting... So basically, I'm running off an iPad, and I would like to improve it by getting different things that would make it better. Maybe some headphones that monitor output, or a better mic, though the mic I got was from J-Wife, so I might not even use the better mic. You know what I mean? It's all about whatever I need at the time, but really it's just to get healthy again, because I'm currently over 300 pounds and I don't want to die that young. I would really like to be able to afford some vegetables so I can go back to my vegetarian diet, because being this big sucks. And I'm happy to sit in a chair all day, but I really got to walk my butt off, literally. So that's what the money would be for. It would be for healthy food, because I can't afford it. I can afford ramen and pasta and rice and beans, but I can't live on carbs, because that's how you get this big on antipsychotics. Junk food and carbs, which is just cheap and plentiful around me. So I would like to leave my house and just lose some weight. And to do that, I would like to go to the store and buy some vegetables, please. But you don't have to do anything. I'm not asking you to. I'm not begging. I'll figure it out on my own. Much pleasure, Jay. Okay, so I just wanted to let you know that I have a YouTube channel called Taught Myself, and that I've decided to start selling merch already with a phrase that my brother showed me saying, "My disability is invisible," of which I made a hat for myself. So I decided to make hats, shirts, hoodies, for both men and women on Spreadshirt.com. All you have to do is search for "My Disability is Invisible." It's in green, and that's mine. You'll know it's me because when you click the sale icon, the same little Divergent Mind icon comes up. And I hope you'll support me. I make about $5 per shirt or per sale. Everything else goes to Spreadshirt. But that's okay because it's still a better deal than a lot of other places. And I really hope you'll support me. Come check me out on the YouTube. Teach me how to do that properly so I can have a community there too. And I await your response. Have a lovely day. Jay.
Hey people, take a listen to the Divergent Mind podcast. You get both insight into living with a serious mental illness and get to listen to a lovely tale about a journey cute little animals need to take. Don't miss out, and remember, divergent minds don't need to think alike.